So hey, this is Chris at Art Secret Studio, trying to keep this talk short, but someone in the class brought up a great thing and I want to talk about it. I glaze with some transparent colors. It's true, I admit it. I'm sorry. It started early in my childhood. It's just a habit I just haven't been able to break. Cobalt blue is a color I glaze with. And why do I glaze with cobalt blue? I'm putting it in the darks where you're not going to see the size of the pigment flakes that are visible. So when you dissolve an opaque color and you make this opaque color into a glaze by adding enough oil, anything's going to float. When you see these big flakes floating in the oil, it's very ugly, especially in the lighter to medium areas. It's very apparent. So in my light areas, I'm very careful to glaze with not just transparent colors, but colors that are really transparent, that dissolve completely. So I'm very aware of the pigment size of the transparent color as well. But as my color gets darker, or maybe if my background's kind of gray like this one, you're not going to see the flakes and it's not going to matter. I'll glaze with anything. So, but typically cobalt will be glazed by me 99% of the time, sometimes in the darks, when you're not going to see the flakes floating around. Now, when would I not do that? Oh, as a class, we used to copy Vermeer paintings where they sort of blocked it in one value, very light, and then would do 10 or 20 coats of glaze over the top. And even the darks were very translucent and transparent, and you would see it, then cobalt was not being used. Okay, does that answer your question about cobalt? So I'm very careful with it and picky. And I'll take you to another extent. Dylan Scott Pierce is one of the world's great watercolorists. I'll glaze with certain colors. Dylan will not glaze with those colors. They are not fine enough in transparency. So he's very picky with how fine that particle is and how beautiful it is. I'm more like a slob, okay? So here's what happens though with your transparent colors. When you put down your color over a white background, you get this. When you put your color over a toned background, pre-dried area, then you can see how bright the alizarin is and you can see how it changes. You can see how each color changes. So look at sap green here and here. There's sap green. Now there's sap green. There's viridian. Now here's viridian, right? Here's cobalt. Here's cobalt. So that underneath color, and I made other charts that show that as well. Now somehow I have to turn this into 3 minutes, okay? So think of it as layers of paint, each one drying like a sheet of plexiglass. You can turn anything into a glaze. Just means it's the paint underneath it is dry and you're putting a layer over the top with oil in it, as if you laid a sheet of plexiglass that's going to dry separate from the painting, okay? Do I ever use straight glaze to go over the whole painting? Great question. No. No. If I need glaze to bring out a color or a vibrancy and I don't want to glaze on it, don't want to add a color to it, I oil out. Different process, different talk. I use glaze to intensify the color. So when you put red on red, blue on blue, green on green, it intensifies. I use glaze to lower the intensity of a color. So if I do red over green, I get gray. I do brown over red, I get a brownish red. So I will lower the intensity and I will intensify. And I actually go in order. I start by intensifying the color. I start by going warm to cool, yellow over yellows, oranges over oranges, reds over reds, greens over greens, blues over blues. And I go warm to cool because my brush is clean and everything's clean. Then I start to say, okay, I need to alter and change some of these things. I wish I had a little more green in this area. So if I do some blue and I need green, then I need to glaze yellow to get green. Don't glaze green or green and blue gets blue-green. You're now talking combinations. Okay, so Then I'm saying, okay, I'm adding, what am I missing? And sometimes it's just a little 1/4 of an inch of stroke on the eye. Sometimes it's the whole side of the face. Sometimes it's the whole background, and I'm using a fan brush in a 5-foot area. Okay? And then I'm saying I'm gonna lower the intensity and destroy areas I don't want you to look at.
Is there a difference in the amount of to intensify?
Yeah, without a doubt. So I wasn't gonna do that, but why not? Okay, so here's how this works. I would have to do this demo though with the palette up. So what happens is, let's see if I can even get my brush clean again because of all this blue in it. So what happens is if I use a tremendous amount of fluid, so it's 99% fluid and 1% red, alizarin, that's the color. Now, I'm gonna use the same amount of fluid and add red. And I'm taking more fluid and adding it to the same pile on the table here. So how much fluid I have, and you know, sometimes that's all I need and I'm done glazing for the day in one part of the cheek. On things that are light, I tend to paint them lighter than I want so I can glaze them. So imagine your value scale in black and white going values 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm shading the drawing exercise and I went from value 0 to 1. I think with glaze, there's 3, 4 values between that. With paint, there's 1. So I think there's subtler changes with glaze that you can't get. So I do dilute a lot and I change that dilution a lot. And I'm very aware of that. That actually is how Raphael, the YouTube video that went out tonight, it was going out at midnight last night as Kevin and I were adding pictures and things. And then he had me look at all these pictures to add and then posted it without me. And then this morning we were changing the title of it. The YouTube video on the Smithsonian, he calls it Creepy Baby. He doesn't understand why it's Madonna and child, and the child looks like he's 55 years old. And so the babies are creepy to him, Creepy Baby. So he titled, hey, I'm posting Creepy Baby. I just knew it was one of the Madonna and child pictures. In the demo that you can watch, that's 2 minutes long rather than talk, there's part of it where this artist, Italian artist, glazed a very thin light coat of pink. Then it dried. Then glazed a heavier, the whole thing was done from here down. So if I was to do this, so the way the art world could do it is, if this Madonna and child looks like this, okay, and she's got pink, he could take the light pink and he could do the whole thing light pink. Then that dries. And then go a little stronger, farther toward the shadow, the whole thing, and blend it. And then go a little stronger in the shadow. Now this has 3 layers, 2 and 1. And then blend it. And as long as there's glaze, wet glaze, I can go almost solid paint, and into that glaze, there's still glaze. That makes it translucent. Nothing is as beautiful as transparent color with glaze in it. Nothing. That is your intensity. So Raphael and a lot of the old masters would paint in egg tempera where it was one color yellow. And they do the lightest bit of pink, a little heavier, a little heavier, and a little heavier in sequential or subsequential layers. Does that make sense?